This week on the Game Marks podcast, we sit down with Justin Leeper. Grab your popcorn, sit back, relax, and enjoy this one-of-a-kind interview. Enough wasting time. The Game Marks podcast starts now.
And now, the Game Marks!
Welcome to the Game Marks podcast. My name is Johnny Clash.
And I am George Feast, and this is it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the one that we've been waiting for, our white whale. Today, we sit down and interview Justin Leeper.
Oh, baby. And if you don't know who Justin Leeper is, by the end of this episode, I guarantee you're going to find yourself going down a wormhole just watching his YouTube videos, following him on Twitter. Guys, listen to every word this guy says. He is full of knowledge, video game knowledge. All the work he's done, SmackDown vs. Raw 9, 10, 11. He's done Death Stranding. He's done Marvel Ultimate Alliance.
There is a part in the interview where he talks about his time where he works on Death Stranding, and it took everything in my power to not completely derail the interview and go talk to him about everything Hideo Kojima for 4 hours.
I know you were itching.
I have very few people in my life that I can talk to about the wonderful series that Hideo Kojima has created, is now creating with Death Stranding. I'm going to reach out to Justin at some point, and we're going to have our own separate conversation about this, but
please do.
I'm very excited for you guys to hear this. This is something that we've been trying to put together since we started this podcast, and this was everything that we wanted it to be and more.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of throw everything out the window here. We don't want to bore you with anything. We kind of want to get right to it. So, without further ado, his resume speaks for itself. He's an author, an actor, a model, and he's responsible for SmackDown vs. Raw 2009, 2010, and 2011's Road to WrestleMania mode, amongst other noteworthy games and accomplishments such as the new hit, Death Stranding. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Leeper.
Hey, George. Are you ready? I said, are you ready for our Pro Wrestling Tees store? Brace yourself, because the Game Marks podcast is now on ProWrestlingTees.com, featuring multiple designs designed by us. Head on over to ProWrestlingTees.com/GameMarksPod today to either play it forever or future endeavor.
Since day one of this podcast back in August, this is the guy we've been waiting for. This is our white whale. This is Justin effing Leeper. How's it going?
Good, guys. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I got such an honor, but yeah, happy to be here. You know, you guys put the feelers out, and I touched your feelers in a non-sexual way, and yeah, I woke up, started this up, and yeah, let's get it going.
Yeah, that's right. So you're in where? Tokyo?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's quite the time difference. It's actually 8 o'clock here, so we're ready to go to bed. You're ready to go.
I'm still ready to go to bed because for some reason Japanese construction doesn't really care that it's night. So we had jackhammers out front pretty much all night long, strangely.
So it sounds like my mother-in-law walking upstairs, which you might hear.
Yeah, I might hear her all the way from Japan.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, so normally each week on this podcast, we have our section that we like to call the Question of the Week. It's a very original name. I know you're shocked. You're surprised at how amazing that name is. And pretty much what it is that each week we go back and forth. 1 week John asks a question, 1 week I ask a question, and this week it is my turn to ask the question. And so the question that I will be proposing to you fine gentlemen is, give me your top 3 tag teams in wrestling can be from any generation, from any promotion. I just need your top.
Jesus. Well, this is loaded. I mean, come on.
Listen. It's the hard hitting question, man. It's very easy to pick your childhood favorites. It's very easy to just go and pick the ones that stood out in your mind. But now, we've been fans of wrestling. You guys have been involved in wrestling for years. So you've seen a lot. You know a lot. This is the question that we're going with this week.
My top 2 is always so easy. I mean, they're permanent. But that number 3 slot, man, that's actually pretty tough.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of want to say my favorites, and that's it.
Nothing wrong with that.
All right. I'll fire them off. Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and oh man, I mean, growing up it was like Nash and Hall, but now if I want to like go back, I do watch a lot of like Arn and Tully. I don't know how they fit into like the Edge and Christian. I would never see them in a TLC with those guys, but
I mean, we're not booking a tag match. It's just who stood out for you, and just it doesn't. You don't even have to justify it. It's just if those are the people.
Oh, well, you've got to justify it. That's the whole fun part, is to justify it.
All right, so let's go, John. Justify.
Okay. I think what was I, like 10 or 11 when the Hardy Boys hit the scene? I think they just catered to kids, like with the colorful hair, the ladders, jumping off everything in sight. I mean, you could say the same for Edge and Christian. I was actually supposed to meet them when I was little, and instead they sent Mosh and Thresher, so you could imagine how I felt. Yeah. I got the autograph head. So, but when you want to meet the Brood and they send Mosh and Thresher, so I think they were kind of always like, oh, I got to meet them.
It's almost like you got Gallagher's brother instead of Gallagher.
Yes.
He's still gonna break watermelons, but you just know it's not the same dude.
Yeah. And then, I mean, Arn and Tully was kind of a later one for me, because the Arn I knew was 99, 98, 99 WCW Arn, who, I mean, that wasn't obviously his full potential, but now if I want to watch something like more real, I'm going to watch them. And their matches with the Rockers also I've stolen spots from those matches. Just like unique stuff that you don't see that looks believable.
All right. Justin, how about you?
All right. I'm a little older, so I'm going to go skew a little bit older, and I'll try not to overlap. My number 1, always Road Warriors, Legion of Doom. When I was a kid, they were just the larger-than-life superheroes that, were unbelievable. Animal and Hawk would just wreck everybody. They'd gorilla press everybody. It was amazing. I later went on to train with Eddie Sharkey, who was the trainer of the Road Warriors. So there's that kind of kinship there that made me respect them even more. So they're always my number 1. My number 2 is always the Steiner brothers. Nice. Because they were so legitimate and just, such a hard-hitting style, the suplexes, the Steiner lines, just 2 tough dudes. So they're always my second. And then for my third, since those are both generally babyface tag teams, I think I'll go back to the Freebirds for my number 3, because they really, I love heel tag psychology. I mean, tag psychology is such a kind of dying art. And, those guys, especially when they had 3 dudes there, they were kind of bending the rules in that way. They were one of the first to come out with music. You had Big Terry Gordy and you had Michael P.S. Hayes just being sleazy and smarmy. And so that was a really neat tag dynamic. So, yeah, I'll go with them as my number 3.
I totally get that. They kind of set the bar for a lot of the stuff we see today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Now I have to rethink my list, because the Steiners were on my list as well. Just because
you can do it. They deserve to be on 2 lists.
I mean, I remember watching them, and just the things that Scott Steiner was able to do, that backflip power slam, just like all like the ridiculous things that they would do, and you're just like, it doesn't look like it's humanly possible. Like, it almost like, as a kid, you watch this and you're like, this is like things that I would do with like my Hasbros, or like these are things that I would do with my action figures. This is not something that you would expect to see like an actual, like a living human being to do. And the things that they would do are insane. So They'll be on my list, but just for lack of overlap, I'll give one more. You said the Outsiders, so I guess I couldn't put them on there too. You said the Hardys. I mean, I wrote out my list because I knew the question. But I mean, the Dudleys have to be on there. They just the amount their tenure throughout all of their wrestling career is just it's legendary. Everything from the early ECW stuff all the way to the TLC matches and everything in between, and just the
heat
even
they got in ECW was pretty amazing too. They just had people going crazy.
Oh yeah, and to see how far Bubba has come just from those beginning ECW days to what he does now, it's crazy because he's always been a big dude, but the things that he was able to pull off it was crazy.
Now, if we're talking about tag teams, we'll have to sing the WCW Steiners theme song. Do you guys remember that at all, or is that a little bit too?
The Steiners.
Yeah.
Yes.
It went. I'll do a spoken word reading. Here's a story of two brothers, Rick and Scott. They don't do drugs and they're always on top. And then it went something like Steiner Line, which was not part of the reason why I included them on my list. In fact, that's kind of a negative towards them, but they still made my number 2.
I was unfortunate enough to miss that whole era, and I came in with dyed hair Scott Steiner and
oh wow, yeah,
barking Rick Steiner, yeah.
Man, back in the day, WCW with their tag team division, they had the Skyscrapers, which was Sid Vicious, and then either Spivey or Undertaker pre-Undertaker. They had Doom, which was Ron Simmons and Butch Reed. They had Harlem Heat coming in. They had Samoans for a while. They had some awesome tag teams back then. They really did. And Steiner's kind of would just suplex the hell out of all of them.
Yeah, and
I wouldn't want to mess with any of those guys.
You named a bunch of bigger, heavier guys. So the things that they were able to do, it's insane.
But they all could work. All those big guys could work.
Oh yeah. And I feel like we have to do honorable mention on my list just because I feel like they need to be in there somewhere. I was a huge Mega Powers fan as a kid. I loved. There was just something about. You get sucked in because obviously it's Hogan and Macho, and they're that larger than life character. The handshake obviously is amazing, but then just to watch that break down and how that whole transition into that storyline went, I feel like I just appreciate the Mega Power as a whole because of what that storyline was.
Yeah, it was a crazy good storyline getting Elizabeth in there too.
Yeah, it was great. And then obviously Rock and Sock is somewhere in there just for nostalgia and those good warm and fuzzies of my childhood.
Like WrestleMania 20.
If I was doing an honorable mention, I thought about adding the Bucks. I really did, because they are really indicative of the kind of shift in wrestling now where you have smaller guys, you have 100 finishing moves and 99 kickouts. And while that's maybe not my favorite style, those two really pioneered it for a long time. I used to, when I was living in LA, I would go see PWG and I would see those guys just, they almost seemed like a parody of the Hardys, but the way that they put their bodies on the line and the athletic ability that they had for just a little indie show was amazing. And I got a lot of respect for them. They were always, fun to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
And they could work many styles. They don't have to work that style if their opponent doesn't cater to it, which was awesome.
Yeah. Wow, I think that may be the most in-depth and I don't want to say, we'll say thorough question of the week that we've done. And I loved it. That was great. Thank you for being a part of that.
Give yourself a Barry Horowitz for coming up.
Yeah, good old pat on the back.
All right, I want to pivot and ask you a question quick. While we're talking about wrestling, I went all the way back in your YouTube like a creep. And there was a video, I think it was a highlight video of you and Austin Aries just beating the crap out of each other.
Oh, yeah.
What year was that from?
So we started training in about 2000, and he came in about 2 months after I did. He was actually living a couple hours away, and I was talking to him on the phone. We hadn't talked in a while, even though we were such good friends growing up. And I was like, hey, I'm wrestling training. And he and I were always, he was the only guy who liked wrestling more than I did growing up as a kid. Like, we'd have our own action figures. We'd do our own things. We would, talk about wrestling, read the wrestling magazine. So he came up to live with me. So he started training a couple months later than me. But yeah, when we finally got to wrestle, I mean, we were roommates at the time. So, you are able to do things to your friends that you don't necessarily do to strangers. So he and I, we'd beat the absolute piss out of each other. And we had only maybe 5 matches during that time. So it was I'd say those matches were 2001 to 2002. And, our first couple of years in the business. And we would just, beat the crap out of each other. I mean, I was very martial arts based. So I was kicking him really hard. Like I was kicking most people pretty hard, and I was kicking him really hard. He used to wear this labrae, this little like piercing under his lip, and I kicked it out of his damn face.
Oh, wow.
Which I kind of did him a favor because it's a kind of stupid piercing. But I mean, and he would hit me just as hard, and he would, suplex the crap out of me or whatever. We did a spot. His first kind of corkscrew plancha to the outside was on me, and I had a bash in my head on the floor outside because I took it a little too high because I didn't really know how to catch a guy either. But yeah, I mean, we went at it anytime that we got in the ring. We tried to make people believe every time,
What's up, Game Marks Podcast? This is Danny Tancredi, and I'm here with my brother Johnny Tancredi, and together we are the Caught Looking Podcast. Each week we bring to you the latest news and reviews on all things baseball collectibles. From baseball cards and memorabilia to bobbleheads and stadium giveaways, each episode will discuss the newest products to hit the shelves of your local card store and your favorite ballparks around the country. Be sure to be following us on Instagram at the Caught Looking Podcast and on Twitter at CaughtLookingBB. New episodes drop every Friday, so be sure to tune in wherever great podcasts like this one are available. The Caught Looking Podcast. Don't get caught looking, start collecting.
All right, so that was the question of the week, and as always,
we're still on that.
Well, it was question of the week, and then a little sub question. And as always, we like to propose the question to everyone else. Please let us know your top 3 favorite tag teams on all forms of social media. You can find us at GameMarksPod, and and I guess with that, we'll just go into the full on interview if you're ready.
Bring it.
All right. So, first question obviously is just for our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your work. Just give us a brief little summary of who is Justin Leeper.
Okay, I'm like a poor white trash kid that grew up in Wisconsin, and I kind of wanted to get out of Wisconsin as soon as possible, so I ended up going all over the place. Some highlights include writing for Game Informer magazine. I was a writer there for 4 years. I trained, again, pro wrestling up in Minnesota from Eddie Sharkey and his fellow trainer Terry Fox, and Eddie is responsible for the Road Warriors for Rick Rude, Bob Backlund, Jesse Ventura, Sean Waltman, just a ton of guys. I mean, he has a huge pedigree up in the Midwest. I was in LA for a while. I did stump fighting there. My trainer, Sensei Robert Goodwin, was the trainer for Christian Bale for Batman Begins. He was the trainer for the Ninja Turtles on the original Ninja Turtles movies. So I kind of transitioned from pro wrestling to stunts, which is pretty easy for me with a martial arts background. Trained with a bunch of great guys in LA, did a lot of stunt stuff there, did some fight choreography too. When I was in LA, I ended up getting a job with THQ. From THQ, I ended up being kind of the guy behind Road to WrestleMania, which was our story mode for SmackDown vs. Raw 2009, 2010, 2011. And then when I left, they did another sort of Road to WrestleMania mode for 12. But I wrote the storylines, I designed the scenarios, I directed the motion capture, I did, wore a lot of hats there, worked with our guys Ukes in Japan, used to come to Japan pretty often. And then when I was a game journalist, I also would come to Japan, so I had a big love for that. After I left THQ, wrote a couple novels. They're both on Amazon. You can find them. Just look me up and they'll show up. Look up Justin Leeper. Then I toured with the heavy metal band Gwar. I played this giant 200-pound dinosaur Gorgor, and I also wore a loincloth and was kind of the guy responsible for spraying blood all over the audience.
All right.
Moved to Japan.
Wow.
about 4 years ago and worked at Universal Studios Japan, where I worked as Ollivander at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. I did the Ollivander wand show 4,000 times. That was a good time, and that got me to Japan kind of free. They paid my rent for a year, got me my visa and everything, and then when that time was up, came down here to Tokyo, or up here to Tokyo, and been living here the past 3 years. I'm a full-time actor, performer. I've done motion capture for Death Stranding, motion capture for Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. I've done crazy commercials where I dress like a werewolf. I've done really boring stuff where like I'm the white cop or the white Secret Service agent or whatever. I did voiceover on the Call of Duty Modern Warfare PlayStation 4 TV commercial, which was kind of a big deal. And I'm just trying to make my way here with that. I got a beautiful wife, Tomoko. We've been married a little over a year now. She's Japanese, but her English is really good, which makes up for my crappy Japanese language ability. And yeah, you're up to speed right now. I'm kind of looking into getting back into games in a way because the acting gig here is kind of volatile as a gaijin. It maybe not giving me the respect level and the pay level that I'd like to do. So I'm looking kind of elsewhere, trying to get maybe back into games, because now there's a title called Narrative Designer, which basically would have explained pretty good what I did at THQ, but we didn't have that kind of title. When we did the credits every year on our games, they were like, yeah, what do you want to be called this year? I was like, okay, I want to be writer this year, or I want to be story mode designer. They wouldn't let me be director because I was not getting paid director level, even though I was doing director jobs. So
technicalities.
Yeah. But and you're pretty much up to speed there.
All right, great. Interview's over. Thank you.
Well, hey, so I just want to cut in. Just want to say congratulations on getting married. John and I also married our wives last year, so we're all part of the newlywed boat.
He will tell you every chance he can. So.
Oh wow, that's my reputation. I'm that guy.
Okay, you should be proud of your wives. There's some people who I feel like really kind of kayfabe their spouse and everything, but I mean you'll see when you watch my videos. Like I love my wife. She's amazing. She's beautiful. I love to showcase her, either her voice or her face on video, and we have a great time together.
Oh, that's how it's supposed to be. We've been trying to get our wives to do a spot on this podcast since we started, and they're just like, it's just not our scene, or it's like, come on, we're proud of you guys. We wanna showcase you guys.
For sure.
So being a wrestler, you've obviously had some personas, you've obviously taken bumps. What was that transition like towards video games? Did you put any of yourself into the game, any of your personas? And what was like the transition between wrestling and doing mocap?
That's a good question. When I was working at Game Informer, I started on their website, and I used to, every day I would play either SmackDown 2 or No Mercy. And I would do the career mode with Justin Violent Lee, my character, or was I Helmut von Strauss at the time? I had two gimmicks. I was the German shoot fighter Helmut von Strauss with a bald head and a pointy beard, and then I became just more me as Justin Violent Lee. But I would put me in that game and go through the story mode and, take pictures and everything. So I was literally in the game there. Now, when I moved to THQ, of course, all my knowledge that I had as a wrestler, I brought to that. Because I think a lot of people who are wrestling fans, as you were saying earlier with the action figures, they kind of tried to treat wrestlers like action figures. So tried to have them do things that were actually physically impossible. And I think I brought a grounded, legitimate nature to that job, and especially to motion capture, where I knew what the guys were capable of doing. So I could stunt choreograph it myself to make sure that it worked. And of course, I brought in some of my wrestling people. I brought in Austin Aries and Colt Cabana and Claudio Castagnoli and Chris Hero and Joey Ryan, some really legitimate, really skilled guys, where I could show, hey, wrestlers can act and they can do all this wrestling stuff. As far as really my trademark stuff being in the game, when they started making Create a Finisher, there were a variety of different move names. And when I was wrestling my finisher, this is really archaic, but my finisher was called the Uber driver. And this was before Uber ever existed as like
That's
a
awesome.
household name. So that was a name that was in there that I made sure that they put in there for create a finisher that Jerry Lawler goes, hit him with the Uber driver. So that was kind of cool to have that in there. I didn't want to make it too much of a vanity thing, so it was more my knowledge and experience that I kind of poured in there rather than like directly like, I'm gonna sneak me in. Now, also though, Ukes would come around and they would scan a lot of the design team, and I'm in the crowd of from SmackDown versus Raw 2010 on. You can see me with my stupid at the time stripy beard, and I'm in the crowd. That's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think, what was it, WrestleMania, the arcade game, the creators were in the crowd also?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the digital. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love seeing that. We actually interviewed AEW wrestler Chris Statlander about doing motion capture on the past WWE game, and we didn't know how much went into it and what you actually have to give and how long it takes and the constant flights back and forth. It seems absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's a good paying gig, but they definitely earn that money. I mean, taking those bumps in that suit and over again just to get, we want to get good animations for that stuff. And it shows because the animations are even playing 10-year-old games now. I'm pretty amazed at how good the animations look. And that's because of those guys just going in there and making those moves look so good.
Awesome. Now, so we I don't know how to say this without sounding inappropriate, but we went through. We didn't creep on your Twitter, but I
totally creeped on your Twitter.
Okay,
please, it's public.
We looked through some of your tweets and responses to questions that people had asked, and we saw that one of the tweets that you said that you were released after a first rehearsal.
Yeah.
What's that about?
The world is small, is it not? So when I was in LA as a freelance journalist and trying to pick up acting gigs, I saw casting for motion capture for wrestling. And I was like, I got this. No worries. Go in there. Interview was in Santa Monica. It was actually really close to the New Japan dojo that they had at the time in LA. And go in there and they give me a little script. I think I was memorizing Chris Jericho at the time, do a little lines, get the mannerisms down for the audition. And they're like, we're gonna beat you up wrestler style. Like, yeah, okay, go ahead. So they do, and I'm selling and whatever. They bring me back for callbacks, and then they're like, okay, you got it. We're gonna be rehearsing in Santa Monica at this ballet studio on this day. Here's your script. You don't need to necessarily memorize it, but be familiar with it. And we go in and we have rehearsal, and there's about 8 guys there, and it was me and another guy were the only ones with any wrestling experience. And so we do the rehearsal, and I get home and I'm feeling pretty good, and I know how much I'm going to be getting paid. Really excited to start my motion capture career. And I get a phone call or an email or something, and they're like, yeah, you don't have to come in tomorrow or ever. Okay.
What?
Shh. Thanks.
Wow.
I don't even know if I got paid for that first day, which I probably need the money at the time. But, that company that was in charge of that, they were the ones who were kind of producing the cutscenes and directing the motion capture at the time. And I know that they didn't like wrestlers. They didn't respect wrestlers as performers, just maybe as athletes. And they did not want to cast wrestlers because, again, we were the only 2 out of, let's say, 8. And then when I got on set, it was those same guys that fired me that were in charge of the motion capture. And because I was in charge from a THQ standpoint, the first year, 2009, I let them kind of do their thing, and I just kind of stayed back. And I still was, the other wrestling guy was still there, not super involved in wrestling. And I, would give my notes or whatever, but kind of defer to them. The next year, 2010, I said, okay, I'm casting now, and I'm directing now, because I know what I want and I know how to get it. You guys do what you do well, but I got this. And then for 2011, before that, I went to my bosses and I said, do we need these guys? And they're like, well, they do make a lot of money. And we could really use that budget for other things. I said, well, let's start looking for other cutscene production people. So we ended up interviewing or kind of auditioning a bunch of different ones, having them take a scene that we've already mocapped and give us their take on the lip sync, on the camera angles. And I think we ended up going with someplace in Korea instead. And so those guys who fired me were out of a job. I mean, it was not a personal decision.
Right.
To me, if you're going to be making wrestling games, you got to care about wrestling. If you're going to be doing wrestling scenes, you have to either know how to do a wrestling scene or bring in people who know how to do a wrestling scene. And these guys did not respect the art, did not respect those performers. And it really showed to me with my critical eye when I saw those cutscenes. There's one cutscene where in 2009 where I was not there for motion capture. I'm not sure what was going on. I was wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of things. Maybe I was in Japan. Maybe I got called away for a meeting or something. And that scene I'm not happy about, because there's like a takedown of Jericho by two big dudes, and I'm like, it just looks like they're hugging him and falling down. It's not it's not good. So like, that was kind of indicative, and that was like, no, I got to do this. I got to be the one who calls action, calls cut, calls we're going to take that one, or gives the notes. Like, it all has to come through me as the director, because I wrote it, because I designed it, because I envisioned it, because I have the credibility in the background, to do that stuff, that like all things have to come through me. And maybe that's kind of egotistical, but as director, you have to be able to answer all the questions, take all the heat. And, I was super happy to do it.
I don't think it's egotistical. If you have a wrestling background and you're able to combine that with a gaming background and utilize your talents to produce a better product for, that's the end goal, is to have the best possible product that you can have. So if you're able to combine your knowledge of both and, produce something that is better than had you not spoken up and put your input, then, I don't think that's egotistical at all. I think that's just you wanting to put your best foot forward.
I don't think that they were it. I was in a very unique situation in that I was a pro wrestler. I was an actor. I was a writer. I knew games. So I could kind of cover all those bases to make Road to WrestleMania. I don't think, and on my way out, I really felt like they thought that they could just stick another warm body. Like, hey, let's get somebody let's get another wrestling fan, put him in here, and he'll make a Road to WrestleMania just as good as Justin did. Not really valuing what I brought in my years in the ring and my years on set and my years, writing, that all those things kind of were necessary to make that mode what it was, because, man, we had 10, 11 months to design it all. Games usually take 18 months, 3 years to make. And we had such a small amount of time. And so I really had to get that going, and you need to have as few moving parts as possible. So having me be this moving part that handled everything else really made it work a lot smoother than it would have otherwise. And I think they found that out when I left.
And those games definitely benefited from it, because you could see like where the tide changed in those games. As someone who's played almost all of them, especially the SmackDown versus Raw series, it really was around then that you were like, wow, okay, this looks real. And you could just tell that there was a shift.
They did a smart thing where they went with more historical based content after that. And, my mode was taking up a lot of the budget. I mean, the cutscenes, we pay for every second that every character is on screen. Like, there's the meters running. So cutscenes are expensive, doing the UI is expensive, doing the getting Ukes to make custom modes for us. That stuff's expensive. So if you're not justifying that budget by, review scores and sales, then you kind of got to get rid of it, especially if you're going like, well, we got next year and then we got a pre-production phase for the year after that. There's really no time. You got to trim the fat as soon as possible, basically. And if something's not enhancing the game, then it probably has to be removed.
You were wondering why we were so interested in having you on the podcast. This is why. This is insider information that you'd never get otherwise. Like, I'm sure that there's other articles and videos that you can see online of other people talking about their experiences, but to be in this niche of wrestling and video games and to have this podcast, to have the opportunity to speak to someone who's been in both and even more. It's such a unique perspective that we wouldn't be able to have ourselves or be able to present to our listeners. So,
oh, cool. I'm glad you're enjoying it. That's kind of the impetus for me putting together my YouTube channel as I have, which my YouTube channel kind of started as, man, I was as frustrated as anybody with how 2K20 was coming along, and I knew a lot of stuff. I knew a lot of the whys and the hows more than a lot of people. So I wanted to kind of share that, because 2K was not saying anything and people had a lot of questions. So I made those videos just kind of me sitting in the sound booth or me at home when I, kind of gathered my new information. And then I built that audience on YouTube from those videos. And then I thought, well, what can I do to entertain these guys? Director's commentary. So I'm playing through my Road to WrestleManias myself and giving commentary as I go, and giving a lot of backstage insight, behind the scenes insight, and then bringing in my own wrestling background, and it's really kind of kickstarted my memories of that time. So I'm about I'm maybe one story into 2010, and I had done all of 2009, so I'm kind of in that mind frame now of thinking back 10 plus years to what was going on at the time and why I made those decisions. And it's been a really fun trip through the time machine, and it's some people have been riding with me and they've been enjoying it too. So it's been really gratifying, because when I was making those games back then, we didn't really have Twitter or Facebook. The only way that we could get user feedback was through like message boards, like the IGN message board, or Wrestle Talk or whatever it was. And I was so focused, I didn't really go into that. So I didn't know, did people like my mode? Did they not? I read a couple of reviews, but that was about it. And you just, as my mentor Henry Rollins says, is like, you create something, you put it out, and then you just create some more. You don't worry about the really, really good feedback. You don't worry about the bad feedback. You just trust in yourself, and you just keep charging forward. And that's what I had to do, kind of out of necessity for the small time frame that we had.
I think that's what drew us into like your Twitter page, your YouTube page at first, was trying to see what other people thought about 2K20, because we kind of started this podcast right around the time that stuff just started coming out. Like we just saw the first screenshots on like one of our first episodes, and we were like, okay, this has potential. Like Andrade looks like Andrade. But then as like you could hear week to week, like, okay, there's something going on with Bianca Belair's hair. There's something happening here. There's something happening here, to the point where we got the game. And I think I was watching one of your videos from October, and you're asking for a patch. There's no patch yet. And we could still say there's no definitive patch that fixed the game yet. And we're in almost March.
Yeah, there's people, I get a lot. I don't play that game. I like to play games that I know that I have a really good chance of liking, so I don't really mess with that. But I get a lot of feedback from people, comments and tweets and whatever, and some people are like, game has worked fine for me, and my response is great. I want people who buy games to enjoy those games. Since I was a game journalist, my loyalty has always been to the player, to hope that I help them, steer them towards good games that they're going to like, that they're going to buy, and they're going to say, boy, I'm glad I got this game. But then there's people who are saying, man, I still can't, do this with Create a Superstar, or I still can't load up this mode without it crashing. So there's people who kind of literally still can't play that game. And that's just amazing when you think about it. And, the things that I exposed about how, Ukes did not quit 2K. They did not quit the games. 2K said, bye guys, we got this covered. We're going to take the 2K18 engine. Visual Concepts has been working on adapting that, and that's going to be 2K20. People did not know that stuff. People kind of, their minds were blown when they heard that, and that's the reason why it's probably had been kept quiet. But I wanted to provide answers to people when 2K was being silent. And I almost apologized to people because 2K is still not apologizing to people. I mean, it's there's no way that game should have been released in the state it's in. There's no way the game should be in the state it's in now, this many months later. And I have very little confidence that 2K21 will be any improvement.
And we've heard, I believe you mentioned it on Twitter. There's been other outlets that have mentioned it too, and it's about the game isn't selling as well as it should. So now there's talks about the budget for 2K21 being cut because it's not meeting the demand, and it almost feels like, you know, they shot themselves in the foot with this, and now it's going to be like, well, you guys didn't buy last year's game, so now what happens for this year's game? And it's just, I don't know. As a fan of both, obviously it sucks, and it's just like you've been invested in wrestling and in video games for so many years that to see the current state that it's in, it's hard. It's rough.
Well, because for 20 years we had pretty consistent games. There have been, you know, versions that maybe weren't that great, and of course the Switch port of 2K18 was horrendous. But the mainline games for this past 20 years have been pretty good, and that's because, unfortunately, because Ukes would work themselves to the bone and be sleeping under their desks in January, and you know, we had guys at 2K who were right there with Ukes, who were kind of, you know, either carrot or stick to get them to the finish line. And I don't know that 2K has, I'm pretty sure 2K let go of all those people. I don't think there's anybody still there from back in my day who was really doing the good work. I mean, there's unsung heroes in that, but there's also the contract. WWE says we need a game every year. Now, I think it'd be great if they put out a game every 3 years and just updated the hell out of that game and kept it super relevant. Every time somebody debuted, it's in the game. Every time somebody changed their outfit, it's in the game. You know, I think that not to steal the EA Sports slogan, it's in the game. But, you know, you even releasing a game every year, it's never going to be current. It's going to come out and you're going to be like, well, Bray Wyatt doesn't look like that. Andrade doesn't look like that. You know, this belt doesn't look like that. So it's out of touch as soon as it releases. So every year is both too frequent and not frequent enough. So if they put out one game every 2 or 3 years and updated the hell out of it in a live service way, which is a very dirty word in video games, because you look at Anthem or you look at some of the Ubisoft games. But for a wrestling game, it makes sense because every week there's a chance for things to have to shift. So you need people working on that stuff full time to be able to shift it. But that, you know, I don't know if that's Vince's old mindset that, well, we need this money. We need to be able to count on this money every year. Well, this year they don't have as much money because the game shouldn't have been released because it wasn't ready. Visual Concepts was not familiar with this engine. It was a crazy, messy engine, of course, because it's 20 years old. There's still screws, rusty screws and duct tape from 15 years ago in it. So I get that they weren't able to make super heads and tails of it, but they had a lot of time to do it. And, you know, it was kind of up to the suits at 2K to go, hey guys, let's pump the brakes here. Let's talk to WWE. Let's take the hit if possible. You know, EA, everybody talks smack about EA, but EA said, hey, NBA 2K or NBA Live not doing what we wanted to do. Let's not release it this year. That could not be cheap to tell the NBA we're not putting out your game this year. But they've done it like multiple times because the game was not up to their standards. So 2K is being out good guy by EA, which is crazy to think about. Yeah,
we've definitely talked about that a few times on the podcast of just how, you know, there was that whole big issue with the Battlefront series and all the issues that EA had with that, and then you see how they handled that situation where they completely did an entire rework of the unlock system and apologized and listened to the fans, and then you see this happening with 2K, and it's exactly what you said. You're just like, how is this even possible, where EA was supposed to be the ultimate bad guy because they never listened to anyone, and now...
But you got 2K that doesn't even leave the servers on from old games. Like once and the whole stuff with you know, creators. I talk to a lot of creators on Twitter, and that's a realm that I have the utmost respect for. Those people who both make, you know, content on YouTube or whatever, create it that way, and people who make like create a superstar stuff and costumes and, you know, customize all that stuff. I love both those communities. And the creators, the in-game creators were telling me like, yeah, once we signed up for 2K20, once we logged on, we could no longer use 2K19's servers. Like, really? That game is not that old. There's no reason why you shouldn't be. you bought a game, you shouldn't be able to keep using that game for at least a couple more years. I mean, servers for other games don't get shut down for like 3 or 5 years, right?
I mean, there were games for the PlayStation 2 that were still live until maybe only a couple of years ago. I mean, I remember when that was that big thing. Like, this is the last. I think it was a FIFA title. Where it was like the last FIFA title for the PlayStation 2, and there were still, if you had the adapter for the back of the PlayStation 2, you could still go online and play. Like, it was still a viable option. So it's crazy to think that servers get shut down so quickly.
Yeah.
Now, a little bit of a shift from wrestling games, but you mentioned before how you had worked you worked on Marvel Ultimate Alliance and with Death Stranding, and just we kind of want to understand the process of going from doing mocap on a wrestling game, and we're assuming that it's very different to doing mocap for something like Death Stranding or for Marvel Ultimate Alliance. So if you wouldn't mind just like taking us a bit through that process.
Sure. I've been a huge Hideo Kojima fan since Metal Gear Solid 1. And even
Same
before
here.
that with Snatcher for the Sega CD, that still makes my top 10 list almost permanently. But so to be able to audition for that game for Death Stranding was a big deal. And I get into Kojima Productions, and that's a new studio that they have. And you've probably seen the pictures of the hallway that's very sterile and white with the lights, and the big kind of Luden statue, which is like a kind of spaceman with a skull or whatever. So I walk into that, and that's really amazing. And I'm auditioning with all these guys who are taller and younger than me. And one guy gets done with the audition, and somebody else was like, was Kojima there? And he's like, I don't think so. And I thought to myself, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I go in next, and of course, Kojima-san is front and center, and there's some other people. And man, I work that audition really well as much as I can, and I take some wrestler bumps just to show what I can do. And I love taking unsolicited wrestler bumps in auditions when it makes sense. I mean, I'm not auditioning for like the baby's dad, and then I take a wrestler bump. But for this case, it really made sense.
I mean,
maybe I get more work. Yeah. But I'm on the train coming home from the audition, and I get a phone call from my manager saying you got the job, and that's like the quickest that I've ever, received the job. Now, a Kojima cutscene that's work. You know what I mean? And I started as Higgs, and Higgs ended up being played by Troy Baker, who did the voice and the face, and he ended up doing some of the later mocap for Higgs, who is the definite heel of that game. And I was loving that character. I mean, I can heal all day. It's great. It's a natural switch for me to do. So I was happy to do that. But then they came to me and they said, hey, Justin, can we add this other scene to your shoot date tomorrow? And like, man, I already have, 4 big long scenes there, but that's cool. And it's for Deadman, which was the character who's modeled after Guillermo del Toro, the director, a really big dude. And I was like, well, I'm not that big of a dude, but I'll work on my fat guy walk. No worries. So they give me a 17-page script, pretty much all monologue, and I need to be on set in 17 hours. Wow. So I have to shove all that stuff in my head. And this is, man, that was the scene, I think, where I talked about the term phobia, which means kind of to have a fear of being touched. And I have to talk about like oxytocin levels. So I have all this jargon, not just like 17 pages of, hi, how are you? No, it's I'll adjust oxytocin levels. Stress should be reduced from now on. Really kind of technical stuff, because Deadman is like what Otacon was in the Metal Gear Solid games, kind of. He's the geeky, technical guy. But they liked what I did, and kept me on as Deadman from then on. So I'd say 95% of the Deadman scenes in that game. But for Kojima, he's writing that stuff as he goes. So they're really, and then it's getting translated by his team, and a really good translation team. But we would get a script, and then maybe a week later we'd have rehearsals, and we would walk through all those scenes with Kojima-san there, with his DP, his director of photography, and the rest of the crew there, and they would give us notes, and we would take notes, and maybe 1 week later we would go to shoot, and they would have a shot list of whoever, whatever, and we'd go in there, we'd put our suits on, now when you're doing motion capture, you have to ROM in, you have to sync your model with the kind of computer at large. So you go in and you T-pose, and then you do some kind of motions, and they're tracking it just to make sure that they got all your sensors, that you're good to go for the rest of the day. For Kojima, it was facial capture also. So they have all these little dots, little black dots that they put all over your face, and you have a rig with a camera right about here. So there's a light there as well, and that's when you're doing your scene for camera. You've got a light in your face and a camera right there, kind of the whole time, kind of Blair Witch style. And it's a little bit hard to overcome that because you're wearing this skin tight suit, and then you have this camera and this light in your face, and you have to act. I have to act like a big fat guy who knows everything that he's saying, like the back of his hand. And with facial capture, you have to say everything perfectly because they're going to animate based on your face. So if you make one mistake, you can see out the corner of your eye, the guy's writing down like what mistakes you made. And you're like, that's kind of a bummer, but you got to keep pushing through, especially when you're doing a 7-minute, 8-minute, 9-minute scene with no breaks. So it's really, man, that I used to not call myself an actor. I used to say I'm a stuntman who acts or a wrestler who acts or whatever. But after doing Death Stranding, I was like, no, I'm an actor for sure. Like I earned that title doing that game, doing that many scenes and that long of scenes. And Kojima-san was an amazing director. Like I directed motion capture, so I know where he's coming from, and I wrote those stories, so I know where he's coming from. And he lives up to the hype and then some, because he's engaging, he's friendly, he comes up with these great ideas. And even better, when I come up with ideas, he'll listen and sometimes take those ideas. That's what a great director does. A great director knows that we are looking at the overhead view of the battlefield, right? And we're plotting big shifts and movements. And then your actors are your boots on the ground. They're your soldiers. And they'll sometimes see something or get an idea for their character that you may not have thought of. So a good director will listen to them and kind of try to defer to them in those ways. And really, my last scene as Deadman, I had an idea of kind of a callback to a previous scene, and I explained it to Kojima-san, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. So kind of a very emotional end thing for my character was like something that I came up with that Kojima-san was nice enough to let us do. And yeah, man, I love that game anyway. I would have played it anyway. And I just kind of put it to bed after about 115 hours. And man, it's the stuff he does with characters and just regular mechanics is great. We were the Tokyo motion capture unit. Your Norman Reeduses and your Mads Mikkelsens, they were in LA doing other stuff. So some scenes were done by us in Tokyo, some scenes were done by them in Hollywood. So we were kind of the B team in a sense, although nobody else was doing my character Deadman. But Troy Baker was doing some of the stuff for Higgs in LA. So there were kind of two teams involved. But yeah, as far as Marvel went, that was a little more typical. That was at the Koei Tecmo studios. Koei Tecmo, who did like the Dynasty Warriors games. Of course, Tecmo did Ninja Gaiden. Neo is a big game that they put out not too long ago, which was kind of like a samurai Dark Souls. But small little place. No facial capture, just a really basic suit, same kind of suit as I was having people wear in SmackDown games 10 years ago. Strangely, they would break up. We would have much easier scenes, like 3-minute scenes, but they would break them up into 1 or 2 pieces, 2 or 3 pieces. I'm not really sure why. That sounds like it's tough for the animators, but I was playing Captain America, Thanos, Venom, Beast, Luke Cage, Odin. Like almost every scene, it seemed like we would have to portray a different character, and we really have to put that body in. And I'm not a big guy, but I played all the big guys. I played Hulk, I played Groot, and I would have to, again, like I did with Deadman, really just invoke that spirit and play that the whole time. I mean, when I'm Captain America, I'm very, very authoritative, and I've got every time I pretend I have the shield, they got to give me the shield. So that was always fun to be like, oh, I think I'll have the shield this time. I'll put my arm up. They're gonna have to put the shield out. But me, with my background in doing cutscenes, I was always trying to think of ways to help the animators. So when I was Deadman, I can't keep my arms here. They have to be out here. Otherwise, the animators will have to move them to keep me from, interpolating into my nose. Yeah, and when you're as big as Hulk or Venom, then you really have to be just giant and super exaggerated movements. Just to make that work. And I guess in wrestling, something that I learned and maybe I learned this watching Triple H, but shoulder acting is very important. So shoulder acting tells a big story. Like if my face looks tired and my shoulders aren't moving, it doesn't sell. But if I'm really huffing that way and really moving the shoulders, that tells the story. So, and even when you're angry too, just kind of the pulsating of the shoulders. So those are the kind of little acting tweaks that I would bring into the motion capture. And people seem to be happy with my performance. I'd love to do more motion capture. Unfortunately, it hasn't really come up a whole lot here in Japan, strangely, even though this is a big video game making place. But there's still time to do some of that stuff.
Now, how much time do they give you in between? So you're going to play Hulk and then you're going to do Captain America. How much time do you get in between the scenes so you can get in the right mindset?
Not a lot, to be honest with you. I mean, we've got a shot list that tells, the cast and who we're all going to be. So they'll usually go in story. Something about Japan and the way that they film is movies and stuff, they almost always film in chronological order. So scene 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, instead of going we're going to go to this location and shoot scene 5 and 12. They just shoot in very linear order. So that's good in that, I played all my Groot stuff pretty much all down the line. But there are times when it's okay, now, you're going to be Drax, and then you're going to be Venom, and then you're going to be, I don't know who else I was, Punisher. Punisher's kind of in a future thing, but you almost, sometimes you're getting on set and they're like, all right, you're this guy, and he'd hold his gun like this, and you'd get those notes pretty last minute. A lot of it, they had images, character art or whatever of that stuff. So there's a guy, and I don't remember his name, but he's kind of like a vampire dude. They're doing a movie on him. I think he's yes. So I didn't know Morbius, and they were like, all right, you're going to play Morbius. I was like, okay, tell me everything you can about Morbius. Because unlike Kojima, where I had scripts a week before, I had rehearsals a week before we shot, for Marvel, it was all right, you're shooting, in 3 days. They'll give you this. Here's the script. We're not sure which characters you are yet.
Oof.
Oh, okay.
Huh.
So you kind of get there, and this is not a proud thing to admit, but I didn't study my lines in Marvel. I would get my lines there when I saw the storyboards and whatever, and I would memorize them at that point, because it didn't really pay for me, because I didn't know which characters I would be necessarily. And the scenes, we shot so small, only really a minute at a time, and there was never more than, let's say, 3 lines for my characters. So I didn't have to, when I was doing Kojima stuff, I was literally laying on my back with the script, reading it, and then saying it to myself till I got caught up. And it's a process to memorize a 15-page monologue. You know what I mean? Just to get that in your head. I think everybody does it differently, but I kind of start at the beginning and just work as far as I can, and then go back and just keep going. And then maybe I'll split it into 5 sections or whatever. It's a process, but when it's only 3 lines, that's, you give me, we got, next scene is this. Okay. I'll, cast you into the Gunengop. Got it. Okay, cool. Let's go.
This literally sounds like a dream job. You're becoming the characters you love. And I know me, probably George, we would never be able to, we can't even memorize like the opening to the podcast without recording it like 6 times. But just to see like how far you've come from like working at Game Informer, which I am also like really curious about. Like this is insane. Like you're living it.
I've been lucky enough to do some stuff that are like, you know, a lot of boyhood dreams. Some people loved wrestling, some people loved video games, some people loved the band I worked for, Guar. And, you know, with those people, I can kind of share these experiences. I'm not sure how one poor white trash kid from Wisconsin got to do all this stuff, but hopefully I'll get to do more stuff as I go. Man, luck plays a huge part of it. Anybody who's had any success and doesn't realize how lucky they are or how much people helped you. I mean, Game Informer, Andy McNamara gave me a shot to come in. And, you know, he was so pivotal with THQ, Corey Ledesma. He's the guy who hired me, the creative director. Like, did I butt heads with Corey sometimes? Yes. Did I butt heads with Andy sometimes? Oh, yes. But I will never forget that those guys gave me that shot, because without that shot, it would have gone to somebody else. I mean, there's such incremental things that could have changed that would have altered the course of all our lives, really. So we have to be very grateful that, you know, those people helped us and that we got lucky enough to, you know, be the top resume on the pile or, you know, have the email go in at the timing that it did, because it's just that small of a window of opportunity, really.
This is amazing. This is the amount of information and just like your experience throughout your career is just, you know, it
speaks for
it's really. Yeah, and it's really eye-opening to get a peek behind the curtain as to the process. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Now we've already talked a little bit about 2K20 and some of the challenges and issues that they're having this year, but you know, we wanted to give you an opportunity to have like an open forum. So if there's anything that was left unsaid that you want to just get out there, this is your chance.
Okay. All right, if I have an opportunity in open forum here to say what I'd like to say, I would say support the things you like. If there's something that you enjoy, if there's a game you enjoy or a wrestler you enjoy or a band you enjoy, focus on that and try and build those people up and tell your friends like, hey, this thing is really good. Check this out. You know, hopefully maybe you like my YouTube stuff. Hey, share, retweet, like, hey, Justin's doing this thing. He's this guy, you know, whatever it is that you like, focus on that. Life is so much better when you focus on the things that you enjoy, because chances are those people who made or are that thing that you like, they appreciate the support and maybe they're getting some negativity from other people. So it's super easy in this culture, especially with social media, to get on the negative stuff. But we all have things that we really love, things that make us happy. Live there, live in what you enjoy, and try and build that and expand that and expose other people to that in this way that we all have a voice. Our voice can be used to lift up these things that we like, to maybe get more people to check them out and to become fans as well. So, man, there's so much negativity in the world, so much negativity online, but when we have a chance to speak, let's try to speak more about the things that we like, the things that make us happy, that lift up our faces, that lift up our spirits, so that people can see that in us and they can feel that positive energy. And man, you know, like us talking about tag teams, what tag teams do we like? That's so much more fun than saying like, oh, Raw sucked because of A, B, and C. No, man, the Steiners. Yeah, they did that, you know, that cool power slam, or, you know, all that stuff. Keep positive. Talk about the things you like, because to me, it never gets dull to talk about cool things, man. There's so much cool stuff in the world, and there's so much that we don't always get to know it all. So like when somebody comes to me with something new that they're into, maybe I'll check it out, maybe I won't, but like I love hearing people talk about stuff that they're into, because that's so much that just brightens things more than having that negativity bring us all down.
Oh my God. Like I want to get that whole phrase like tattooed to me as my next tattoo. I love that. That's like everything I try to live by also. So that was perfect. Well said. Tremendous.
Absolutely. If more people had that mindset, a lot more things would be better off, and I feel like people would be a lot more productive.
I think people know that they have a voice, but they don't realize the power of that voice.
Agreed.
So, and there are people who, man, there are people with a small follower count, or, they don't have a lot of outreach or whatever. And I get that people in this world, they want their voices to be heard. And it's easy to talk smack about this wrestler and maybe get a negative retweet from them, and then start this discourse with other people and just start throwing punches at them. But I tell you, man, if you come with positivity, that'll get heard too, and that'll get appreciated. And if we all try and get in that mindset a little bit more, I think the internet will become a less toxic place, and we will be maybe happier as people. Even with that small voice that we have, try say something good with that voice.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you again. Everything you've shared with us today. I know you probably want to get on with your day. We've kept you long enough. But before you go...
It's been a good tight hour.
What's that?
It's been a good tight hour.
Yeah. Before you go, we want to hit you with some rapid fire questions and then release you into the wild.
All right. Bring it.
So first, what's your favorite video game genre, and what's your favorite game of all time?
So my favorite video game genre is, I guess the one that I've played the most has been open world Western RPGs. Your Skyrims, your Fallouts. Maybe I would consider Dark Souls in that because it's kind of non-linear. My favorite game of all time is, and probably will forever be, Deus Ex, the 2000 Ion Storm game by Warren Spector and Harvey Smith and Ion Storm. My favorite game of all time. The stuff that did with player choice, with free form gameplay. That's always the granddaddy. That's always the best for me.
That's actually one of my cousin's favorite games of all time, and he has this ritual where he plays it every year. He has to play through the storyline. It's great. I've played it myself. I've watched him do all the multiple choices and do every different ending that you can. It's great.
And they thought of everything too. It's like you go through this sewer tunnel and you get this experience exploration boost. Like, oh, they knew that I might do this at some point, and they're rewarding me with it.
It's awesome. It's great when game developers think of because game developers are gamers. So when they put themselves into that mindset and they get more creative about the options, it really shows. So in terms of mocap talent, if you had to make a Mount Rushmore of mocap talent that you've worked with, who is on your Mount Rushmore?
Wow. All right. I would go with Eric Brown. Eric Brown played Sam Porter Bridges in the Tokyo stuff, and that's the character that is modeled after Norman Reedus. He did a lot of stuff with Kojima in the past. He's got legit military experience. Knows just the right small little subtle things. He's a great scene partner, so I put him on there. Eric Brown. Austin Aries was he could do anything that I had him do, and the stuff that he did as Santino in 2011 and 2010 is is amazing. So I would put why don't you say hi?
Hi, whoever.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, they can hear you. We're recording now.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So sorry about that.
No
Austin Aries would definitely make my Mount Rushmore. He is, man, that guy, I've known him for 34 years or whatever, and he always amazes me with the stuff that he can do. So he would have to be up there. I guess for motion capture, you have to go with Kojima-san himself, just because he's the director, and you can't understate the value of having a good director. And then I guess another guy who I'm buddies with, so I'm a little biased, but there's a guy named Joel Dickerson, and he's in this band called the Lethal Weapons, which is an amazing, hilarious band out of Japan. Two guys. It's very synthy and very kind of tongue-in-cheeky. But he and I auditioned for Marvel Ultimate Alliance together, and I'm a wrestler guy, and he's kind of a small comedian-ish guy. But man, he did Rocket Raccoon? Yeah. He did Rocket, he did Spider-Man, he did some of the smaller characters to my bigger characters in Marvel, and he was just amazing. just funny, always made great decisions, always made choices. Something as an actor that is very important and maybe understated here in Tokyo because everybody's so rigid with what they want, but making choices is a really big deal to boldly choose a direction as your character and go with that with confidence. Just like in wrestling, as you know, John, like when you do a move, when you do a bump, you cannot be tentative. You cannot be skittish. You have to go full commitment into that bump. And that's the best way to have it look good and to have it be safe. So in acting, when you make these choices, you also have to go boldly and fearlessly. And I think Joel does that. And so that's my, Mount Rushmore of people that only I know, except for Kojima-san and, of course, Austin Aries.
Okay, so favorite console of all time?
I got to go Super Nintendo. That was the one that sparked it first. There are just so many legendary games there. So when I made a top 100 list a couple of years ago, and I did 10 years before that, and you've got your just Super Mario World, Zelda Link to the Past, Super Metroid, Final Fantasy VI, aka Final Fantasy III. Then you go down, you've got, that had Street Fighter 2, that had Mortal Kombat 2. You've got some good Castlevanias and Contras and tons and tons of RPGs on there. So Super Nintendo was just, you had a lot of control, you had a lot of buttons on the controllers, you had a lot of options for gameplay wise. I think that we must pay homage to the fact that a lot of buttons is actually a good thing. Now, I'm not talking about the Jaguar controller with the damn keypad, but when you only had, I had a TurboGrafx growing up. You had an A button and a B button. You had the A and B and the NES controller. You can only do so much with two buttons. So to have those shoulder buttons, which was perfect for, Mario Kart, another great SNES game. Absolutely. So yeah, definitely Super Nintendo.
Awesome.
Cool.
What is your number one favorite wrestling theme song of all time?
Ooh. First one that comes to mind again, and this is hilarious because it's such a Rage Against the Machine ripoff, but like the first DX theme, man, with dun dun.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Dun, dun, break it down, burn, is so iconic, and like it has that great build, and it's badass. In part because it is such a Rage Against the Machine ripoff, but that's my gut instinct is to choose the DX theme. As much as that Motorhead stuff, the Time to Play the Game. Anytime you get Lemmy on record, that's legendary. But I have to go with my first pick, DX.
Yeah, that's still gym music. Like you put that on, you're going, you're going on. Yeah. All right. So anything new and exciting coming up that you're allowed to share with us here?
I just want to say that I'm doing this YouTube stuff, and I right now just passed 5,000 subscribers. So I'm very grateful that I've got this audience, and I'm, trying to put out a lot of content with my wife, with us playing games, with us walking to the gym. People seem to like some of that stuff, but I know that my bread and butter is wrestling fans, wrestling game fans. And I will continue to play the Road to WrestleMania modes. And it's really unique. If you're a fan of wrestling, games, I hope that you enjoy it, because it's me playing these things and telling you what was going on at the time, what was going on behind the scenes, why I did this thing that I did, how that goes into, well, that bump there is, when I did that bump in my wrestling career. So I bring a lot of my background to it that's very unique, especially as a director. That's, unprecedented to be able to give you my take on it now as I'm playing it. So, hopefully people will check that out and, keep supporting me on that way. And that's kind of been my pet project lately, is I try and put one or two of those out a week as I work through each of the storylines. I think I just finished the Create a Superstar storyline of 2010, which was tons of fun. It culminated in putting Vince in a chicken helmet, and having him do the dance, which that song cost THQ $10,000.
Wow.
Because they were like, "Oh, go on this site and find the best chicken dance song." And I was like, "I like this one." And they said, "Okay, fine." And later they went, "It was $10,000."
Wow.
Like, that's
a trusting attitude, though.
Yeah, that's cool. It's fun when you can just throw money at stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what I'll go to next. I might do the Edge story, which has Edge and Maria kind of Edge manipulates Maria when she gets to be GM, and my old buddy Mr. Kennedy is the kind of babyface antagonist of Edge for a lot of that story. So that was fun. But I'll go through everything. I'll go through all 3 games. And so if there's a story that you remembered, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to play it and, probably tell you a bunch of stuff that you never knew about it before. Stuff like, hey, Jack Swagger in this was actually played by Claudio Castagnoli, a.k.a. Cesaro, who was his tag team partner later on. Like, it's stuff like that, every episode is probably just a bunch of facts that other people don't know.
And I love videos like that. So I'm
DVD director's commentary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, I could sit and do this all day, but I know that you're a busy man. You probably got a whole day planned. So,
maybe if people like this and they have some other questions they want to do for me, maybe we can do a follow up in the future.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you back. But hey, Justin, thank you so much for sitting down with us today, depending on where you're listening. I'm
also standing right actually, but yeah, I'm happy to stand with you guys.
Let's tell everybody where they can find you on social media. Give them your YouTube URL. Just let them know where everyone can find you so they can interact with you.
Okay, my Twitter is @JustinLeeper_yo. And you can follow me on there, and I'm very pretty active on that. And then on YouTube, I think that Violent Lee with no space, Violent Lee, is the easiest way to find me on YouTube, or you can just search Justin Leeper. I put that tag in every video that I do. Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Let's not give Facebook any publicity. So that's usually Twitter or YouTube is the best way to interact with me. And I try as much as I can to answer every comment that I get on YouTube, just because, man, ever since I was a game journalist, like if somebody takes the time to reach out to me, I'm going to reach out back to them, because they gave me their time. I'll give them my time.
Awesome.
That's an amazing outlook on it.
Thank you so much.
I'm not famous either, so it's easy for me to say that when I have 5,000 subscribers and 2,000 followers, whereas my buddy Austin Aries, I'm like, engage with these people. He's like, I got like 400,000 of them, and some of them hate my guts. So it's easy for me to say engage with everybody, because I'm not a big deal.
I mean, except to us two little game nerds who do a podcast every week, but whatever.
Awesome. All right, well. That's gonna do it, man. Again, just thank you so much, and if you're willing to come back on, we would absolutely love to have you back on.
Yeah, man. I plan on doing this wrestling thing, the YouTube stuff, until I get to the end, and that's really what I'm trying to make sure people know about it, and drive up those views as much as possible, just because it's so much more motivating when you get that feedback. I try not to listen to positive feedback too much, because if you listen to the good, you got to listen to the bad. Luckily, I haven't had a lot of the bad. It's been overwhelmingly positive. But when I get some good views, when I get good comments, that motivates me to keep going and putting out more stuff. And we content creators, or any kind of creators, we creators love to create, and we love to talk about the things that we've created. So it's been very fulfilling, and I want to keep that going.
Yeah, you're someone we look up to for content and everything. So thank you.
Thanks. That means a lot. I take that seriously, and I like the stuff that you guys are doing. And again, thanks for reaching out to me. And I look forward to hearing this, as much as I'm not too into my own voice. But
I'll send you an early.
We had to deal with too. I wasn't very used to just hearing myself talk all the time, but obviously you want to listen to the product that you're putting out. So each week I hear myself talk for like an hour, and I'm like, okay.
All right. Have a good day. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Have a good night. And I appreciate this. Appreciate the opportunity. Good talking with you.
Anytime. Have a good one, Justin.
All righty. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.
Hey, guys. Johnny here. While we love talking about video games and wrestling here on the podcast, we wanted to share with you a new offer from our friends at Stitcher. An enormous amount of shows and bonus episodes are available on Stitcher Premium, such as Office Ladies, Comedy Bang Bang, WTF with Mark Aaron, How Did This Get Made, Bitch Sesh, True Crime Garage, Marvel's Wolverine, and plenty more. Right now, you could sign up for Stitcher Premium for only $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year using our code GameMarksPodcast. That's all one word. Head on over to Stitcher.com/premium for this amazing deal and a free month. That's Stitcher.com/premium and use code GameMarksPodcast. That's all one word. Game on, Marks.
John, I mean, how unbelievable and eye-opening was that interview?
I'm honestly speechless. I sent you, while we were recording, we were kind of like trying to steer via messaging, and at one point I just sent you like a selfie of my face with just my jaw dropped, and I just said, "This is me right now." And it was me for the entire hour that we talked to him.
It was so just eye-opening. You think you know a little bit. You think you have a pretty good understanding of how video games work and the process, and the amount of effort and work that goes into making video games, even one small simple little section of it. And just sitting down with Justin for the last hour plus, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing, and I know that now because he told us so much. It was just, I have a whole new appreciation for video games and the amount of work and effort that goes into it, because you really, unless you're in it, you really don't know how much goes into it.
Yeah, usually we just play the games and we talk about, we're not developers, we're not professionals, we're just guys who play video games and see, our phrase, are you wearing nostalgia goggles while you play this game? And we don't really give this many peeks behind the curtain other than, I guess, the Chris Statlander interview. And Justin, he just nailed it. He's a professional. He's super nice. I think I have a man crush.
And we got a run-in from his wonderful wife.
But
I mean, I don't know how you top that, but I really don't even know where we go from here. But I mean, I guess we should probably talk about what we're playing next week on the podcast, but it just feels like we've peaked. So
no, okay. So next week on the podcast, we're going to try to keep the ball rolling. Next week, we will be playing WWE SmackDown. Here comes the pain for the PlayStation 2 with a very special guest, one of my good friends, one half of Bear Country, Bear Bronson, making his return to the podcast.
Oh, man, it's always, we said the last time that he was on, any opportunity that Bear Bronson wanted to come on this podcast, he was always welcome. And boy, did he take us up on that offer quick, and very excited to have him. Cannot wait. But I think it's time to put a bow on it, John. What do you say?
Yeah, let's take it to the bridge.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week here on the Game Marks Podcast. Please check out our Pro Wrestling Tees store at prowrestlingtees.com/GameMarksPod. We have 4 wonderful shirts there. And as of right now, it is currently the best way, besides listening, to support the podcast. Also, be sure to follow us on all forms of social media at GameMarksPod. Leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you choose to listen to your podcast. And as I sit here, as I'm recording this with you, John, having just finished wrapping up this interview with Justin, we obviously just need to give him the biggest shout out and a huge amount of thanks for sitting with us and taking time out of his busy schedule. And as he mentioned before, please be sure to follow him on Twitter at JustinLeeper_yo. And at his YouTube page, you can just search Justin Leeper on YouTube and drop him a follow, drop him a subscribe, ring that bell. Make sure that you stay in touch. He's very interactive, like he said, and he's just a pleasure to talk to and to deal with. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us this week. This is a big moment for John and I. So Yeah, I guess the only thing that's left to do is for you to say goodnight, John.
Game.
Too much.
Game over, Marks.
Too much.